multiple PPPoE servers in MikroTik. In this video, multiple PPPoE servers in MikroTik, we will check if our MikroTik devices are capable or will allow us to set up more than one PPPoE server. Theoretically, yes, we are allowed to have more than one PPPoE servers based from RFC 2516. If you will check with the IETF or Internet Engineering Task Force webpage, so during the PPPoE discovery stage, it allows to discover all the PPPoE servers or access concentrators in the broadcast domain. We will list and discuss various use cases for which we will deploy multiple access concentrators. We will configure or set up multiple PPPoE servers, and for our demonstration, we will have some multi-vendor test Pppoe clients to try to connect to our multiple access concentrators. So we have here our simple topology. So we have an internet cloud, and our ISP router is of course connected to it. So therefore there will be internet connection, and this ISP router will provide connection to our multiple PPPoE servers. So we have MT1-PPPoE1 for our first PPPoE server or access concentrator, and we have our MT2-PPPoE2 for our second access concentrator. So our access concentrators are connected via their Ether1 interfaces going to the ISP router. So we will also configure or make sure this has an internet connection first before we'll configure or proceed to configure with the PPPoE setup. And for our MT1, our first access concentrator, so it should serve with an IP pool or PPPoE pool starting with 172.16.00 segment, and it is connected to our LAN switch via Ether2. Okay, so MT2 is on the 10.0.0.0 segment and is also connected via Ether2 to our LAN switch. So meaning to say our access concentrators are connected or both connected to the switch. So therefore they are serving the same broadcast domain. So MT1 and MT2 again are serving, or they are connected, or they are within the same broadcast domain. So what could be the possible use cases that we might deploy multiple PPPoE servers in the same broadcast domain? So one example is we have a lower model PPPoE server that is running fine. When we have some clients that are perhaps in a few number, okay? And in the course of your operation, you're starting to have more clients or more users. So therefore, your PPPoE server will not be able to serve in what particular performance that you are expecting. So you are planning to also migrate or to change, but you don't want to disrupt your current PPPoE server operation here. So that's why you put in a new PPPoE server, and your new clients or some of your clients that you are testing this new MikroTik or new router will be connected to this instead, and offloading your lower model MikroTik router. Other reason is, although it's not depicted in this network topology, For instance, you have a better internet connection or a new internet connection than your present one, and you are providing premium services to your new clients, or perhaps to your existing clients that will upgrade, or you are offering a new premium service and it will connect to this particular Pppoe server that is providing a better internet connection than this one. So meaning to say you still have this server to cater your standards or your ordinary user, and this router will cater for your premium customers or VIP customers, and is connected to a better line or perhaps a lease line or a better internet service provider for that matter. Or simply you are experiencing some service degradation and you want to test, see if you will offload some of the connections here to a new Pppoe server, see if the performance will be back to normal again, and you will try to test it out on a new Pppoe server. So those are the possible use cases. So again, perhaps you have some better uplinks already and you want to provide some distinction of your service, premium and standard, or perhaps you want to categorize your customers and to minimize or to lessen the troubleshooting task so that it will be on this particular router, the other half, or perhaps the some of the clients will be here and the other clients will be here as well. Okay, so or you are simply offloading your connections to this particular new router, see if the performance is improved, or perhaps you just want to have more redundancies in place so you will not be tied to this single point of failure. When this Pppoe server will have some issues, then of course you will have some issues with your clients and you are want to be prepared for that eventuality, so you prepared a secondary Pppoe server. So I powered up our first access concentrator. So for a review, so this one, so I powered on this device, so this is this one, and there are already some pre-configured settings like the identity to make our demonstration faster or finish faster. So system identity, so you have that name, MT1-PPPoE1, and for interfaces, so it's Ether1 is connected to the internet or ISP router, and Ether2 is connected to the switch. So you have only two ports that are running, Ether1 and Ether2. We will not be creating bridge for this demonstration because simply we are just focusing our attention to Pppoe. So the Ether1 is a DHCP client. So it has an IP from the ISP router and there's a default route. So meaning to say IP routes. So you have now a default route. So you can also do some ping test. So to check if we have an internet connection, and yes, we have an internet connection. And let's try to test a different IP, and yes, we have an internet connection, though not a good one. Then on the IP firewall NAT, so we will add here an NAT, perhaps let's just have the standard one, out interface, Ether1, then action masquerade. Apply, okay, so obviously you could put in some more entries here or values or settings. So, but then again, for demonstration purposes, we will just configure the basic masquerade rule. Next, we will configure our Pppoe. So we will close this firewall menu window. So we could start with IP pool. I'm just going to breeze through with this configuration since we have already a video on how to configure a Pppoe server in MikroTik. So 172.16.0.10, perhaps we'll start with 10, 16.0.100. So the requirement for MT1, it should have an IP carrying 172.16.0.0 network. So we'll settle on that one, apply, OK. So take note on our IP address, we don't have any IP address on our Ether2. So we don't have any 172, and we will not also configure any 172.16 network on our Ether2. So we'll close this one, and we're done with the IP pool. So we go to our PPP menu, wherein we have the Pppoe configuration here. So we have our profile. So let's have Pppoe profile first, and local address will be just the IP address of this MikroTik. For the remote will be our Pppoe pool. So let's have some DNS servers here. Okay, so it should be 8, and we'll have some protocols here, but we'll not do it now. Limits, will not configure any. Queue and scripts will not configure any. So general, only in general tab will configure. Protocols none, limits none, queues none, scripts none for now. Click OK. Next is secret. So let's say client number 1, and password will be 12345678. Service will be Pppoe, and we have now the profile as Pppoe profile. Okay, so that's for our client 1. So click apply, click OK. Next is Pppoe server. We'll just put in a service name, and this time we'll put in, for example, MT1 service 1 or MT1 service, or perhaps we put in service 1. Then it should be listening on our LAN. So the Pppoe should be listening on Ether2. So that's why we should select Ether2. Don't have any configurations here. We'll just check this one session per host, and we can change some authentication values, but we'll just leave it by default. So apply, OK. So it's disabled, and we will enable it. Okay, so perhaps we will add an interface binding, so you could also see how it's done. So Pppoe server binding, and for example, for our client 1, and the user is client 1, and the service will be MT1 service 1. Okay, so client 1 MT1 service 1 for our Pppoe client 1. So apply, okay, so that will be a Pppoe server binding, and this should be running or connected once our test client here will authenticate, and will power it up and authenticate and see if it can connect to our Pppoe server. So I powered up the second access concentrator, MT2, and to make this demonstration or video tutorial faster, so I already pre-configured this one. So let's click connect, and as always, you have the system identity, change to MT2 Pppoe2. You have the interfaces, only Ether1 and Ether2, and you have the IP address only for the Ether1 interface, being IP DHCP client. So meaning to say there is also a route for that, and I've also configured a firewall NAT for that. So if we try to check the internet, before we take a look at the PPPoE. So okay, so there is an internet, so there's quick timeout there, single timeout, and yes, there is an internet connection. Next will be the PPPoE, so IP pool. So I've already added an IP pool for PPPoE only. That will be on the 10 segment because this access concentrator will provide the 10 network. And we'll go to the PPP menu, so profiles. So let me add the pool here. So 10.0.0.1 will be the IP address of this router when there is an established PPPoE connection. DNS server, so we have a different one. We don't have limits, protocols, and scripts for now. So secret, so we have the same client one, secret or user and password. Okay, so service PPPoE profile, PPPoE for our PPP profile. So we have enabled the PPPoE server, but this time the service name is different, MT2-service1, listening on Ether2, so one session per host, and the same authentication. And we have also added a server binding. Okay, so although it's Pppoe client, don't be confused. This is still a Pppoe server binding because there is really a Pppoe client. But this one is Pppoe server binding, only that the username, okay, is client1. So we put it on that particular descriptive name. So user1 is client1, or the user is client1, and the service for this one is MT2-service1. So you could have a PPPoE server with multiple service names. So for our configuration, we only have one, but you could really add a new one and to make it a service 2, for example. So the reason why there are multiple service names, because you can change your profile here and some authentication changes. Also, you could have a certain scenario wherein your client will be, we are not talking about multiple servers yet, we are talking about a single PPPoE server with multiple service names. So meaning to say your test clients or your clients should be able to have a service name entry when they connect, or value when they connect to this one, to distinguish which particular service name from this PPPoE server you would like to connect. And that is if these clients will have that service name parameter. So the other option for client in a multiple PPPoE server or access concentrator scenario is, aside from the service name or different service names that are configured on our PPPoE servers, our client, if they will support it, can also connect to the access concentrator name rather than choosing only the service name. So we could tell, for example, this client to connect to the access concentrator name, and that is the name, in this example, MT2-PPPoE2. And for example, this client, if this client will be able to support it, connect to the access concentrator name, MT1-PPPoE1. So now for our first test PPPoE client, let's have some Mercusys router. So we will connect our one port of our Mercusys router to this switch, and we will power it up and see what are the PPPoE parameters does this client gives us or make available to, so that we could set and configure it. Okay, so this is connected to our Mercusys client on the LAN ports. So let's do an IP config. So I have static IP of 192.168.1.88, and our Mercusys router should be reachable on 1.1. Okay, so let's just minimize it. Let's open the Google Chrome, and 192.168.1.1, and this is our Mercusys router. So let me see if it allows a simple password of 1234567 8. Okay, so never. So here is our choice for our one connection. Okay, so for Mercusys, so connection type is PPPoE, static IP, dynamic, L2TP, PPTP. So obviously it's PPPoE. Username is client1, and password is 1234567 8. You'll notice we don't have any advanced options or options that we could put in for service name or access concentrator name. Or perhaps we'll check later once we go inside to this Mercusys, because we are actually in the setup wizard page. So let's click next. So again, we don't have service name and access concentrator name. So I could not check whether my password is correct, 1234567 8. So let's just check. And for the Wi-Fi name, let's just put in test and test. Since, okay, so test 1, 2, 3, 4 for our test wireless, and click next and click finish. Okay, so we are at the basic menu. So we have three options. We have device management, network, and we have wireless. So let's go to network. So there is a wonderful check here, meaning to say it's connected, and yes, there is a connection. 10.0.0.100. We acquire the PPPoE pool, and if you'll notice, it's on the MT2 side. Since we cannot really choose between MT1 and MT2, since on the Mercusys router we don't have options to put in service name and access concentrator name. Let's click advanced, see if there are some changes. Okay, so connection type, and yes, there are some options here that we could play around for our PPPoE settings. So since we are connected on MT2, which is, that's why we are getting 10.0.0.100 IP address. So let's try to put in the service name of the, what we call the MT1. So that should be MT1 service 1. And we will not put in the server name yet or the access concentrator. So we'll put in the service name. So click save. And perhaps we'll disconnect. And it's automatically disconnecting and connecting. And you see, now we are getting the 172.16.0.100 IP address. So meaning to say we are now going, or we are getting our connection from our MT1, since we make use of the service name MT1-service1. Okay, so then let's try the server name parameter here, or settings here, see if it will go back. So what we can do is we'll try to change it to the server name or access concentrator name of our MT2. So MT2-PPPoE2, and let's just remove the service name and click save. So it should be disconnecting or disconnected. See if it's able to connect. And yes, we are now back on our MT2, since on here on the server name we put in the access concentrator name of our second MikroTik, or this is the system identity of our second MikroTik, MT2-PPPoE2, and therefore it's connected. Okay, so since we are connected to our PPPoE, so let's try to do some ping test if we could reach the public IP addresses. So in Mercusys will be system tools, diagnostic tools. So we could start first with quadruple 8, and the start is here. And yes, there is a reply. Let's have another IP. And yes, there's a reply. And let's try a domain name this time. And click start. And yes, there is a reply. So meaning to say this particular Mercusys will be able to go to the internet. Then we could check this computer that is connected on the LAN of this Mercusys router. Okay, so let's do some ping test. So quadruple 8, and yes, there's a reply, and yes, there's a reply, and finally for domain purposes, and yes, the domain is properly resolved. Okay, next client will be our Ubiquiti. So I only have currently a Litebeam M5 radio for testing. So let's go and powered up that particular device. Okay, so I have powered up our Ubiquiti M5 or Litebeam M5 radio. So it is now responding on its default IP 192.168.1.20. I've also opened the login page 192.168.1.20, and let's go to the setup process. So UBNT, country is Philippines, and language is English. Accept the terms of use or EULA. Alright, we are now inside our Litebeam M5 page, so we'll dismiss this little message. So we have some menus here. So our focus is on the network portion, and we'll see on this settings or network settings how we can configure as PPPoE. For the purposes of our demonstration, so right now it's currently as bridge, and we'll configure it as router or even SOHO router. Okay, perhaps we could try small office, home office router, SOHO router, and see if there is PPPoE settings. And yes, there is a PPPoE setting that is here. I want to show first that we have created a new client, client 2, with the same password. So under the PPPoE server binding as well, so we have created a new one for our client number 2. So same goes with our MT2 PPPoE2. So we have the client number 2, new user, PPPoE user, and the interface server binding or PPPoE server binding. So we have the client 2 as well. So back here in our Ubiquiti, so network mode is SOHO router for just demonstration or testing purposes. For example, the configuration mode is simple. Let's see, we have our PPPoE. Okay, so we have username, we have password, we have service name. So I don't see any access concentrator name. Okay, so if we go below, okay, so LAN network settings, so I think nothing should be here because this is for LAN. DHCP, nothing should be here. Port forward, nothing should be here as well. And multicast router routing settings, nothing here. So let's try advanced, see if there's a change. So PPPoE, username and password still, service name, and I don't see any access concentrator name here. So there are now more options. So interface. So let's see on our LAN 0. We edit this one. So nothing much here. If we edit, so we'll edit the MTU as only. IP, aliases, VLAN, bridge network. So firewall, static routes. So nothing here. But anyway, let's try what is been given to us here on PPPoE by typing in the username and password and service name. So the moment I key in the PPPoE credential and click change, I will be losing connection to this M5 because our one interface is LAN 0. That is actually where I am connected. And the bridge network. Okay, so currently the bridge 0 and you have the bridge 0 is WLAN 0. But nevertheless, we could see the change or if it could acquire successfully an IP address, hopefully, if we will go back to our PPPoE servers or our MikroTik routers. Alright, let's configure our Litebeam M5 with a PPPoE connection. So username is client2, password is 1234567 and it should be correct, or let's remain to show. Let's have MT2 service 1, and for block management access we will uncheck this one so we could verify later, because I might lose connection because the one interface is LAN 0 and the LAN 0 we will connect it to our switch or our empty routers which are acting as PPPoE servers, and the LAN interface bridge 0, so the bridge 0 is WLAN 10. Okay, but nevertheless we should be able to see hopefully if this is correct, and this should be authenticated to our MikroTik and this will acquire an IP address. So client 2 1234567 MT2 service 1 fallback IP, so perhaps I want it to fall back on the same IP. Okay, so change, and yes, we need to change our current password to a different one before we could actually apply a new configuration change. So okay, so apply, and it should be connecting, so we should lose connection here, and let's see it on our MikroTik router. We are now at our MT2 router since we configured our Litebeam to be connected to this service MT2-service1 instead of MT1-service1. So let's check the active connections, and yes, our client 2 is connected with a 10.00.99, and on the interface PPPoE server binding, the client 2 has now a running flag. Let's check if we could ping. Tools ping 10.99, and yes, there is a reply. And let's close this one and see if we could manage or go inside. So tools telnet, so address is 10.00.99 telnet. Okay, so connection refused. So let's try tools telnet SSH this time, and the user is UBNT. Okay, so telnet, and password is 1234567 and there you go, we are now inside our UBNT or Litebeam. So fconfig, and you'll see the PPPoE 0 interface got an IP address of 10.0.0.99 using the point-to-point protocol. Okay, so done is our client 1, which is a Mercusys router, and our client 2, which is Ubiquiti Litebeam M5, which we make as a SOHO router instead. And for the third and final test Pppoe client is our CHR or our MikroTik CHR router. So our MikroTik client is up. So let's connect. And what we will do is we will just configure the Pppoe client on this CHR router. Okay, so here in our MT3 client, so we don't have any IP DHCP client configured. We don't have any IP address configured. So all is only system identity. And for PPP configurations, we don't have any. So from here, we can go in and click the plus sign and select Pppoe client. So let's select Pppoe client. Let's go to the general tab. So Pppoe. So for example, client 3. So interfaces. So it should be connected to Ether 1. So okay for that. Service. So let's try service first. Let's see if we can connect to our MT1 instead. So I've already configured client 3 on both of our MikroTik Pppoe servers. So the same credential. So use peer DNS. So I'll just select or check this one, or you could create your own DNS configuration or client configuration for that. So let's try to apply and click OK if all are correct or all configurations are correct. So the Pppoe client interface is running. Okay, so let's take a look at the IP address if we did acquire on MT1, and yes, it's on the 172 segment. And let's see if we have some routes. Yes, there is. We have checked the peer DNS, so yes, we got the DNS configuration quadruple 8. So this time let's test if we can access or reach public addresses. Let's try to ping. So yes, there is a reply, and yes, there is a reply. Now let's go back to the Pppoe client interface and go into the dial out tab. So if you notice in MikroTik, there is an option for AC name or access concentrator name. So we could try, so remove the service name instead and put in the access concentrator name. So this time let's connect to our second Pppoe server instead of using the service MT1-service1. We'll use the AC name MT2-Pppoe2. So we should expect that our IP address and the other settings should be from our MT2. So click apply, click OK. So let's see, it's running. So IP address. So now it's on the 10 network, not on the 172 network. So this one is okay. So IP routes, there is still a route that is okay. So let's take a look at the IP DNS, and yes, the dynamic servers is quadruple 9 instead of quadruple 8. So let's do some ping test this time. So new terminal. So let's do a ping for quadruple 8. Yes, there is a reply. Let's do a ping for domain name, and yes, there is a reply, or the the domain name is properly resolved to a public IP address. So in this video, multiple PPPoE servers in MikroTik. So we have tested that our MikroTik devices are capable to set up more than one PPPoE server. So there are no issues if we have more access concentrators in a single broadcast domain. So we have listed various use cases for which we will deploy multiple access concentrators. We have tested PPPoE connection to our multi-vendor test Pppoe clients. So we have Mercusys, we have Ubiquiti, and we have MikroTik Client. From there, we have tried using service name and AC name if the setting is available on those test clients. Thank you for watching.